So example number 5, we have 5x plus 3 over x plus 3. And what we want to do is take a look at the terms in the numerator and the denominator and see if we can factor anything out. So in the numerator, we're looking at 5 and 3, and do they have a greatest common factor? No, they don't, right? And then we look at the variables. Do they have common variables that we can factor out? Well, this has an x, this doesn't have an x, so no, we cannot factor out a variable. So the numerator, we can't do anything with it. The denominator, we take a look, here's a 1 and a 3. So can we factor out anything? Is there a greatest common factor? No. And then here's an x, and here's no x. So there's no common variable we can factor out. So just leave it the way it is, and it's done. It's simplified. Okay, nothing more we can do with it. And now we want to state the excluded values. So how do we find the excluded values? We take the denominator and we set it equal to 0. So x plus 3 is equal to 0. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides to solve for x. X is equal to negative 3. So here's our simplified version, and our excluded value is negative 3. All right, so let's look at the next one down here. We have 5 over n plus 5. And again, we want to take a look and see if we can factor anything out, right? In the numerator, it's just one term, so there's nothing to factor out. In the denominator, we have two terms. We have the n and the 5. So we're looking at the 1 over here and the 5 here. Is there a greatest common factor? No, there's not. Can't pull anything out. Is there a common variable? No, there's an n here, and there's no n in the second term, so there's nothing we can factor out. So it's simplified, right? Some of you might be tempted to cancel out the 5 and the 5 here. We cannot do that because this 5 is not a factor, right? We're adding. Factors are when you're multiplying. So if it was n times 5, we can cancel out the 5's, right? But since it's n plus 5, we cannot cancel out the 5's. So it's in its simplified state. Now we want to find the excluded values. So we take the denominator and we set it equal to 0. And we solve for n by subtracting 5 on both sides. And so our excluded value is n is equal to 5. Right? So let's go ahead and say 5 over n plus 5. And my excluded value is negative 5. All right. Let's look at this one here. So we have 2x minus 6 over 4. And so in the numerator, we're looking at the two terms. And is there a greatest common factor between 2 and 6? Yes, there is. So I'm going to pull out a 2. And what times 2 is equal to 2x? It's going to be an x. And what times 2 is equal to negative 6? That's going to be negative 3. Right? So now I have two factors in the numerator. We have 2 times, and then I have this binomial. Right? So in order to simplify, we want to cancel out a 2 in the denominator. So can we pull out a 2 from the 4? So yes, of course we can, right? So we'll pull out a 2, and so what times 2 is equal to 4? 2 times 2 is equal to 4. So now, do we have common factors in the numerator and the denominator? Yes, we do. We have a 2 and a 2, and so those can cancel out. And that's going to leave us with x minus 3 over 2. Okay, now state the excluded values. Well, we're looking at the denominator. Is there any value for x that will make this denominator equal to 0? No, because the denominator is a constant. So we have no excluded values. Okay, so let's come over here. We have x minus 3 over 2. And then our excluded values are going to be empty set. There are no excluded values. Right? All right, let's look at number 8, and then we'll end this. So we have 5x over 10x squared minus 5x. So what are we going to do? Well, at the top we only have one term, so we're just going to leave it as is. In the denominator we have two terms, so we want to factor out what we can. If we are looking at the 10 and the 5, is there a greatest common factor? Yes, there's a 5, so I'm going to pull a 5 out. And then we look at the variables. Is there a common variable? Well, we have 2 x's over here, and we have 1 x over here. So I can pull out 1 x, right? So what times 5x is equal to 10x squared? Well, what times 5 is equal to 10? That's 2. What times x is equal to x squared? That's x, right? So 5x times 2x is 10x squared. So we're good here. And then now what times 5x is equal to negative 5x? So that's a negative 1. Like that. We could double check our factoring by distributing out. We get 10x squared, and then we get negative 5x. Right? So everything looks good. And so now, do we have a common factor in the numerator and the denominator? Well, this is a factor because we're multiplying here. So yes, we have a 5x in the numerator and we have a 5x in the denominator, and so those can cancel out. Okay. So some of you might be tempted to put a 0 in the numerator, but it's not a 0 in the numerator, it's a 1. Okay, so we're leaving a 1 up there, and we get 2x minus 1 in the denominator. And so now we want the excluded values. Now that we simplified, find the excluded values. How do we do it? We set the denominator equal to 0. So I'm going to add 1, and I get 2x is equal to 1. Divide by 2, and I get x is equal to 1/2. So here's our simplified form, and here's our excluded value.